Hello, my fine and lovely friends. I hope you're having an absolutely terrific day, week, month, and 2021. I may be a little late on this video. I was supposed to record June's Q&A. Unsurprisingly, in June, I have been so ridiculously busy that I, at least to me, understandably deprioritized it a little bit, but I still owe you, and as I am every month, incredibly excited to answer your burning questions. First of which is undoubtedly, I notice your glasses are different, Hunter. Why, yes, they are. Wait, that wasn't a question. I notice your glasses are different. What, how do? This is why I don't ask the questions and you ask the questions. Yes. For the first time in, I think I figured at least 12 years, I've gotten some new frames and a new prescription. I did have another prescription that I got a good while back. I don't know how long ago it was, like 6-7 years. But the prescription was so horrible. I'm pretty sure the optometrist was actually drunk during the whole situation. It was like I almost instantly got a headache and I couldn't see not a goddamn thing. It was completely unhelpful. And then, so, you know, I'd spent money on getting new frames. The frames were really cool. I really liked them. But there was like one optometrist in the tiny little town that I lived in, and I was not going back to that man. I was not going to return. Not after that experience. So then I just had like these frames just like sitting around. Not these frames. And now I don't know where those are at all. So I got a new prescription and I started rocking some, new frames this week. Ordered them online. I got 2 pair of, like normal glasses and then 1 of prescription sunglasses. This is one of the normal pair. I couldn't quite find anything quite as iconic as the white frames that I had been rocking. Those were, custom and incredibly affordable. They were almost the same price as the frames that I got here. Totally, like unique by a craftsperson in Portland that I got a long while ago. And I'd just been rocking them for like so long. And they had like all kinds of like chemical spatter on the lenses where like some of the coating had like peeled away. And so if I took the glasses, like you could see the little spatter on the frame. Sometimes if I like looked up just the right angle, you'd see like reflection on the glasses and see like all these spots, like not even like tiny little, but like some big splotches. And so it was like a little outdated. The prescription still worked pretty decently. My eyes don't seem to have changed dramatically, but needed an update. 15, maybe closer to hitting the mark, somewhere between 12 and 15 years. Time for a change. But it's also time to answer your burning questions. First of which, could you ever commit to tiny house life? I have a fantasy where I have like a tiny house life. I have a fantasy where I have like gone to some hardcore minimalistic lengths. I don't know. I have definitely gone to great lengths to minimize the stuff that I have, but it ain't minimalistic. Okay, I've taken some minimalistic approaches to, trying to find out like what really matters in my life with the stuff that I have. What do I want the shape of my home to actually be like? But here's the little fantasy thing. And I haven't actually put this stuff into play, but here's the little fantasy thing. The way that it plays out in my head is, and this has been happening to me for like a long time, this fantasy cropping up in my mind is like, imagining myself in like a one very tiny room where like that's where I live. Could I get by on having just a handful of things, And I think really quickly, I don't try and like make a list of what they would be, which might be valuable, but I think about what the essentials would be that I'd want to keep with me in order to feel like I had, a fulfilling life and be able to, be creative and do some stuff. And it's like, there's a small stack of books, I've got a couple of really basic art materials, because really when you're getting creative, you can do a lot with some really basic stuff. I mean, I can draw with some dirt if I wanted to. Of course, I'm not going to. I'm going to spend a lot of money on all kinds of things that can really, appropriately reenact the process of making art with dirt, but professionally. One way or another, can I find myself committing to tiny house life? I want to say yes, because that fantasy is strong of like just having a couple of things in the house and really living that more simplistic life. And especially not having to, as I have in many other times in my personal and storied history, had to go hunting for something in my own place, where I'm like, where does that thing go? I've gotten a lot better about like organizing all of my stuff, and I think I could apply a lot of that experience of like paring things down, really finding the essentials, something that I use in my like kind of survivalism stuff too, where it's like, okay, well, you really need to like not have a 300-pound backpack. Then if you gotta skedaddle, you gotta make yourself a bug out bag or whatnot, you really gotta like prioritize, like what is the least stuff that I can bring with me to have the most impact, that absolutely checks these like core boxes. Like it has to be able to do this stuff. Like I have to be able to live and survive with the things that I bring with me, and potentially nothing else. And I've built these kinds of, bags before. I really enjoy it. It's like a creative experience. Like, have I ever used one? No, I've never. Well, that's not necessarily true, but I haven't had to like, like flee the law and like bring like only the essentials with me, and then like survive on the lam in the cut for like, 3 months at a time or something. That's never happened. But I have gone, on prolonged backpacking trips and stuff, and like really had to orient my perspective of what objects matter, why they matter, and what they can be used for. And I really like to, like, when it comes to, and this is really like a very adjacent kind of analogy when it comes to building out like the bug out bags. I really like building them and then taking them apart and rebuilding them and then taking them apart, not back to back to back, although that is sometimes fun too. But, it's like reassessing. It's going through the assessment process again. And I think doing that in my own life would be, it has been fun when I've done it. I've done some like pretty clean sweeps of like, I gotta minimize as much as I can. Oh, next time I move, I want to move with way fewer things. And, this is really cluttering up. There's a lot of like noise in this space, figuratively speaking, not like, but visual noise, or just like a lot of clutter, things that, invariably when I move, I find them again because they've been in a box or they've been in, some storage container. I find them again. I'm like, oh yeah, this is so cool. I'm so glad I kept this. I'm going to keep this again. Does this really matter? Yeah, it definitely does. I like it a lot. Put it back in the box, move again. Don't use the entire time I'm living in that other place. Go to move out of there and into a new one. Lo and behold, there's that box again with all that stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, I should really. So I've gotten rid of a lot of things over the years. And more recently, when it comes to like nostalgic stuff or things that are like emotionally important to me, I've gone through the process of like taking photographs of them and like having it in a particular folder, on my phone with some cloud syncing, where it's like, letters from grandparents and a school photo from when I was a kid, and things that I picked up on a vacation that I was like, oh, this reminds me so much of that vacation. Do I need the object itself? I mean, maybe in some cases, like I've put that on a display shelf or whatever, so I get that regular reminder and I'm like, oh yeah, that's so nice. Do I need the object itself, or do I need some connection to the memory? If the object serves the purpose of connecting me to the memory, then, will a photo of the object connect me to the memory? If that's the point of the thing, not necessarily to have the object, but to have the memory show back up, to have that refreshed, then can I achieve that in another way that doesn't take up space? Things like that are what make me think that, yeah, I could commit to the tiny house life. I think there would inevitably be things that I miss, because I think there's always going to be this like grass is greener kind of quality and component But I think it's at least possible. I mean, I have that same perspective, but inverted. Now, I'm not living in a tiny home. It's a small space, but it ain't no tiny home. And you know, and I also fantasize about, like, what would it be like if I had way fewer things? Then if I had way fewer things, I'd probably fantasize about, like, well, what could I do if I had all this extra stuff and all this other room? And that's just a matter of perspective. You know, that's just a matter of how things are viewed, not really the situation itself. I think the situation could totally be doable. That was such a long answer. Why do you like toast? Why do you like toast? I think there's a transformative process, as with all cooking. There's a transformative process that happens that converts one thing into something else. And sometimes the other thing isn't necessarily better, but it sure feels like it. With toast, I like the smell of it. I like the crunch that happens. I like that, you know, like biting into it and it's like crackle, crackle, crackle. I like that. And the texture, those are very nice qualities. And I think the heat does something little magical too when I'm eating foods. Like, some foods like deserve to be hot and some foods deserve to be cold, but there's also some quality of, like, when an aspect of a meal or a food item interacts with heat or interacts with some other quality, that it kind of, you know, it gets augmented. And when I'm thinking of toast, I'm thinking of, like, peanut butter and jelly. I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And when the toast is hot and you get the peanut butter on there and it starts getting a little, like, you know, like gooey and melty, and I think that there's a change in the way that the sugars present themselves in the jelly. It turns into something way better than simply slapping some peanut butter and jelly on some bread. Slapping it on some toast and letting that alchemy, that magic happen, that's definitely some good stuff. Which sock do you put on first? Which sock do I put on? Well, which sock do I put on first? For whatever reason, I'm thinking I put on my left sock first. It's the left sock, then the right sock. But maybe that's just how I did it this morning, and because of the proximity in time, my assumption is that is just how it happens, because that's the only recollection I have of any kind of priority of foot to sock order. You know, one thing that I definitely do, and this is not an order of sock, but I only really have enough clothes. I only have enough like day wear, right? Like normal clothes that I wear on a normal average day. To last me like a week. I've got like 2 times that many socks and underwears, but for like shirt, like I have 2 pairs of pants that I wear throughout the week, and I have, I think 7, I might now have 8 t-shirts, and so like, you know, wearing a new one every day, shirts at least, I end up having to wash my clothes once a week. But the tendency that I've fallen into is not to get them out of the dryer and fold them, but leave them in the dryer. So when I wake up in the morning, I have some things that are like right next to the bed. Like I took off my pants to go to sleep and those pants are still right there and they're great. They ain't stinky. I'm putting them right back on, right? So I'm like ready to go right there with that. But there's like the socks. Those are, you know, a lot of the socks are in the dryer. Any of my shirts are in the dryer. So I'm like hustling a little bit back and forth to the, like out into my main living space where the dryer and washer and dryer is. Grab a couple of things, start putting them on, go back into the bedroom, put some other thing on, like where I got my hats and where I usually leave my hoodies and my pantaloons and my shoes. So there's like this really kind of weird like hustle process back and forth when I'm getting ready for the day with clothes. Why is Space Squirrel? That immediately makes me think of Squirrel Girl. Now, I don't know a whole lot about a whole lot, especially true when it comes to comics, but that's also an ambiguous enough statement to be just broadly accurate. But whenever we talk about comics, or just philosophy, back when I was getting my degree, there was always somebody talking about Squirrel Girl. being like the one person who had defeated like all of these otherwise undefeated, nemesis, the like great, arch enemies of the comic book world. Like, I don't know, Squirrel Girl is Marvel, so I'm assuming like, I don't know, Galactus and Doctor Doom. Why is Space Squirrel maybe to combat Galactus? You can see the connection I made. These are the things that happen instantly in my head, but then like trying to walk back through them is a journey. It's a journey. And Silver Surfer, Silver Surfer was always battling Galactus. Whoever wins. How have you shaped your identity as a streamer? Oh my god. Yeah, okay, you went deep on that one. How have you shaped your identity as a streamer? Well, okay, so wait, there are like maybe two directions that this can take. One is, how has my personal identity been reshaped by streaming? Or how has my identity as a streamer, the one that's presented to the world, been reshaped intentionally or incidentally over the years? Like, I've chosen like how to, approach this one aspect of my streamer personality, and really worked on refining that quality. Or, after 3 years of doing it, I, suddenly found myself performing this kind of action, or engaging in this sort of way, or always producing this kind of content, or talking about things like this. One thing that stands out, and maybe this isn't answering the question, but somebody pointed out to me recently, and it's been pointed out to me several times in the past, that I never really seem to take offense. That's not quite the right word. I never have a serious problem, that's visible at least, when I get asked the same question over and over again on streams. Like from the chat. Because we do a lot of launch events, there's always people popping in going like, hey, is this game worth playing? What do you think about this game? My favorite one is this free to play? It always gets a sassy answer. I always have this like, and it's true, like the word always actually applies here. I think that I always have this like beginner's mind, the beginner's mentality, the beginner mindset, where I'm often thinking about something in fresh terms, even if it's the same question asked again. I, will be equally perplexed or equally confident, and, think my way through presenting the information as though I'm the one learning it. As though I'm the one, like, both crafting and receiving the answer to the question. I think I do this with a lot of things. I tend to, like, walk through it in a way that teaches me, which can often come off as me being pedantic, right? And, like, trying to, elucidate, like, all the little fine points and turn something into a teaching moment and, like, a lesson to be learned. But in large part, it's because I'm the person who's doing the learning as I'm talking through and thinking through the subject. Like, is it really fair to present the game in this particular light? Has anything changed in my perspective, as I've been playing these last 6 hours from when somebody asked earlier in the day? Or how has that maybe changed over the 3 days that I streamed it for 12 hours a day? And then even commenting on the changes that have happened, or the lack of change that's happened. Like, on day one, in the first hour of the streaming of this game, I thought it was like this, and it turns out it is exactly like that. That's just like commentary on the perspective itself that is fundamentally unchanged. And like, this is all like conversational. These are all conversational points that I find really interesting. There's something about that freshness, even though it's the exact same question, and maybe even the exact same answer. It's the same not because I'm pulling from what I brought in before, from how I phrased it previously, but because I'm thinking freshly through it again. And it happens to be that information that I have is giving me the same perspective. Now, that's not always true, I would assume. I do have some, sometimes somebody asks something 5 minutes ago, there's the exact same question, new person shows up, same question, and I'm like, yep, to recap, it's boop, 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 and this. But I think I tend to find myself still elaborating on it in at least a slightly, somewhat different way. And that is consistent between streamer personality and my personality. I love rehashing the same topic over and over and over again. I never know if something fresh is going to show up. In my own head, in the conversation, the sort of magical process that is communication, where I can say one thing, somebody else hears something completely different, and then there's like the back and forth. Like there's this whole almost idea of play in communication that I really like sort of bringing to the fore. I think it helps keep things, like really fresh for the stream. Now, it may suck being on the receiving end of that and like hearing roughly the same answer every time, but I think I surprise people. I think I throw some curveballs out there sometimes. Wait, what was the question? How have you shaped your identity as a streamer? Shaped your identity as a streamer. One thing that's reshaped itself, I'm not sure I'm ever going to actually answer this question proper. One thing that's reshaped itself over time is how much of my private life and personal life I put out into the world and how active I am in sharing, as most content creators do, in a way that most content creators do. I've been a lot more restrictive in terms of not necessarily like trying to keep things private, but trying to move away from the always on mentality, which is something that can bring burnout. And this is something that has itself been reshaped by experiencing burnout. One of the things that really came up from that is the always on mentality is one where we feel compelled to constantly turn stuff, whatever it is, into content, to constantly be sharing on stream, in YouTube videos, on social media platforms, everything from the meals that you ate to, look, I pet my cat today, to, here are the new glasses I got, which I did share recently, to here's something that I bought, look at how my plants are developing, here's some personal project or hobby that I'm engaging in, I just watched this movie, here are my thoughts. It's a constant stream from here's my experience in my life to here's content for you to consume. That particular quality, content for you to consume, is part of what I think is like really hazardous on both sides. The idea of the content creator implies content consumer, and that I think devalues the entire process and product. And even then, like talking about it as a product, kind of hazardous there. Now, I'll still use the term content creator all the time because I think it's a nice kind of catch-all, but it does have these sort of problems in there, implicit in the whole process and the idea, using that word process a lot, in that we feel compelled to turn our thoughts, our lives, our identities, and each of the subsequent aspects into something that is a product, which removes the lived experience of it, right? Part of my perception of a moment, at least in the olden days and sometimes now, is framed around or framed within the question of how well will this be received, right? Will the consumers of the content that I'm about to turn this thing into, will they like it? Will I get a lot of likes and retweets and faves? Will people in chat be celebrating this story? Will it create a dull moment? Will it change how people are thinking of me and looking at me? And whether or not they think that I'm a worthwhile individual to be following or to put stock in my words and thoughts. It takes away the joy of the moment. And I think to some extent that's kind of fine because it can be kind of repurposed in a way where it's like, oh, this isn't something that's exclusively for me. This is something I get to share. I get to commune with people, right? And that for me is part of my mission, like what I want out of my entire life, and then also all aspects of my career and business, is to have communication and connection. And that requires, putting myself out there to commune and connect. But I think that has to be measured a little bit better, because of that infiltration of the always on mentality, of the shaping my life into a product that somebody's buying into. And that is that devaluation that I don't want to have, and I don't really want to promote it. I think there's some amount of sacrifice there that is totally valuable, valid, and worthwhile. Like, I want to go out of my way to, convert some of these life experiences and these things that I'm doing and making and thinking into, some input point for somebody else, right? Where they get to, allow it into their lives and think about it in a similar way, or maybe have a rebuttal and a counterpoint to it, whether or not they voice it or not, but, to add value, real value, things that matter and mean something to a life, to add that into the kind of dialectic and the conversation that exists among a content creator and their audience. Or in my case, I like to think of it a little more closely knit, like a tribe. We all have ways that we input and influence the engagement, the collective, in a number of ways. And I don't want to remove myself too far from that to be like, oh no, these are my experiences and these get to be mine and mine alone. I want to put that stuff out there and see what other people in my tribe are also putting out there, right? It's like, and not just like waiting for my turn to talk and giving them a little bit of space to talk, but not really like hearing them. Part of it is creating like a kind of a soft, malleable experience. And that requires some vulnerability, I think. And that vulnerability requires sharing intimate parts of my thought and process and life. But it's still, a work in progress. Like, I don't really have a way to go like, this is the way to do it, and this is how I've nailed it. But that is a reshaping of, the streamer identity and personal identity, and how those two kind of fluidly, mix in with each other and affect each other. That's a heckin' answer. I'm already at 30 minutes here. Follow-up question about subtly asking a question. Is this in a better format for not actually asking a question while simultaneously asking a question? No. Would you choose to... Would you choose to have the ability to fly if you could only fly 6 inches off the ground and had to be naked? I mean, sure, because I don't have to use the ability to fly, but maybe I could just fly around my house a little bit, just a little bit. Although, 6 inches, I'd be bumping into a lot of stuff. Like, if it would have to be like very finely nuanced and custom tailored flight to do exactly what I wanted it to do. I think that, yeah, that totally sounds fun. Or maybe just get a few like real close friends and rent out a, high school gymnasium, on a weekend when nobody's going to be there, right? Lock doors, board up all the windows so nobody can see, and it's just like 4 people just flying around 6 inches off the ground naked. Because again, though, having the ability doesn't mean I have to use it. So yeah, sure, I'd take that. I'd put that tool in my tool belt. What are your favorite pizza toppings? Why isn't it bananas? Because bananas is nasty. Favorite pizza? Over this last year, I've really gotten to like thick cut bacon on a pizza. There's something about like the density and texture of it. And of course, that like salty, fatty flavor is just so, so finger licking good. I do like my meats. I tend to have a lot of meatsies on the pizzies. You know what I'm saying? What is your favorite type of media to work with when you're creating art? I don't know if it's my favorite, but what pops into my head was what I used to work with when I was a career painter, which is watercolor on non-permeable surfaces, right? Non-permeable meaning stuff doesn't absorb into it. And when it's watercolor, like the whole premise of watercolor traditionally is that you have watercolor paper and you put the watercolor on the paper and it soaks it up. It's like part of the paper now. It's not sitting on top. It's all one thing. And, you know, there've been a lot of time that people put into really refining and experimenting with different methods and approaches and processes with, you know, watercolor. But one of the novel ones, or at least as far as I know novel, is to try to put watercolor onto some surface where it doesn't soak in. And that sounds bizarre and kind of dumb, but there's a little bit of magic to this. And it's my favorite thing. Okay, maybe it's not my favorite thing because that was sort of how I started out answering this question. A great thing, a magnificent and terrifical thing to me is how when the water evaporates, what happens to the pigment that is sort of suspended in this medium. There's like, what I ended up seeing and what gives me great joy is how the pigment, which is its own kind of material, suspension might not be the correct word in terms of chemistry, but is the, you know, little bits that are floating around in the water. They have their own kind of density. And when I would mix different pigments together and put them onto, you know, non-permeable surface, and it's like flat on the ground, so it's, you know, not really like, I'm not like putting it on there and it's like instantly driving itself right off the page, which I did do sometimes. But it sits on the surface, and as the water evaporates and moves around a little bit, right, as like the different densities start interacting with each other, and maybe there's a little bit of a breeze or a shift in the air pressure or a slight tilt on the sheet or on the board that I was taping it up to or whatever. Sheets of plastic is what I'm talking about. You know, it would move, and physics would drive this like really interesting thing to happen, which made a lot of the work look like natural organic formations. Organic in the loose term, loose sense of the word. I will get there eventually. These organic formations on the surface of the planet and out in, you know, other planets and stuff, where you have like rivers and tributaries and, you know, all of these, you know, like when you see these like built up, you know, hillsides and stuff that have those little, all those like chaotic shapes that where the runoff from, you know, like snow and rain over millions of years has like reshaped the side of the mountain, and it gets these little like crevices and divots, and you can see where the water's been driving itself down into the valley and like out into this like larger river, and that river feeds into some, you know, bigger grand river, and then like out into the ocean, and these beautiful, really brilliant shapes that only really happen in nature. That's what starts happening with the paint, with the pigment. You know, some of the pigments will be denser than others, so they'll sit to the bottom, and other ones are lighter, so they'll sit on top. And then as some of the water starts moving, it starts carving these shapes into the other pigment that was sitting lower down. And you'd get these just wonderful, you know, naturescapes on the surface of the painting. And then as the water evaporated, pigment just sits there. It's done. It's finished. It's set. Now, all of that can be removed. I've had plenty of times where I just, you know, like I accidentally dropped some water on it and oh, there it is. all that pigment comes right back up, and now you have this like weird little crater of pigment sitting in this weird spot. But I can manipulate that in a variety of ways. It's really, really heckin' fun. Really heckin' fun to do that. But I also really like charcoal. I like charcoal maybe for similar reasons. Not in terms of like how the physics cause it to shape, but how you can shape and reshape it, you know. I've never really dabbled in like oil painting or acrylic painting all that much, but with charcoal, like I'd like cover the surfaces and block in these big shapes and then start, you know, erasing some of it or smudging it with my thumb, and like kind of, it's almost like sculpture, but two-dimensional, you know. It's like additive and then subtractive. You're putting stuff on there and then removing it and reshaping it and pushing it around, and oh god, that really active kind of process is great. Much less do I enjoy, as much as I fantasize about it, much less do I enjoy the idea of like actually diving in with a whole idea for the way work is going to come out, and I start with like instantly like doing precision detail kind of work. Like the foot goes here and the nose goes here and then the hand goes here, and I'm like drawing out the foot and then following it up to the knee, and then that's exactly where the knee. Don't give me any of that. I don't want to do that. I want to build and carve shapes and form into this two-dimensional surface. You know, I want that like active. Oh god, it's so good. Anyway, I think that does it. It's the end of the questions. Now this was June's Q&A. July's Q&A is going to be coming up, like a few days too, because I still gotta get on that. Now, as per the usual, if it doesn't even matter if you like the Q&A content. You can ask me whatever questions you want and get other people to listen to the answers. There could be some trickery in here, but this is the best opportunity for you to ask the burning questions. Whatever it is, something goofy, something you want advice on, or my perspective, some part of my life and my history, my mentality, struggles with, mental health, which I try to be, very open and, appropriately vulnerable about. Art stuff, streaming stuff, hobby stuff, life stuff, philosophy stuff, food stuff, pet and kitty cat stuff. Tackled that a little bit, mentioned that once today. Anyway, I love y'all. Thank you so much for being patrons, being part of my life, and not only giving me the opportunity to, present these aspects of myself through answering questions and the entertainment and comedy that often comes along with it, but also, kind of presenting yourselves through the questions and leaving comments about something that popped into your head as I was talking about one of these subjects, or the way that it relates directly to you or completely conflicts with your experience and your perspective. Like, I love that back and forth, and y'all give it to me, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it to a tremendous degree, like on a soulful level. This is a lot of what I, want to contribute to the world and get out of, this tremendous amount of effort that I put into all the aspects of, what I do, just as a living human being flesh bag, and as a creator of the arts, of the video content, the streams, the text and writey bits that I post on the Patreons and all that. Anyway, I will belabor that point to no end, so I gotta find an off-ramp. I love y'all. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Thank you for being good to me. And good luck! I grabbed the mail. I don't remember what I ordered. Cross-promotional idea. A soda based on the game called Dr. Prepper. Wait. Dr. Prepper. Dr. Prepper, the soda. That's all my... Ooh, Cookbook 2! That's as good as it gets. That's as much as you get. You gotta pay for more, okay? Cheers. Song, though, it's pretty good. It is pretty good. Oh, that cheer is freezing. Oh, okay. Go a lot higher for the secret cheer. Oh, Jesus. Yep, good die right here. Woo! Wow, even just stuck in a corner. My damage output must have been incredibly good right there. Listen, cats love me. They love to scratch me. They love to bite me. They love to puke on my bedroom floor when I'm in the middle of sleeping, and are not at all deterred by a thrown pillow. Yeah. I've got a glass stomach. No, actually I have a stomach of steel, but I have glass intestines. I'm gonna kick off the rerun after our quick outro. That's right, Hunter. Hold on, can it be super meta? Wait, how long can I get that to repeat? Oh my god. Oh my god, it's working. Yes! Yes! How much stone do I have? Still got plenty of stone. Look at this! I can't believe this is working so well. I am disappointed. I am become despair, the destroyer of integrity. Oh, this is my sad face. This is my job.